Israel has finally lost Radiohead's very own Thom Yorke. Now, of course, Thom Yorke still had a incredibly middle-of-the-road take on it, but it's an indication that the tide shift is here. As you guys know, Radiohead has been getting railed for being Zionist, for performing in Israel, and also for not really saying anything about Palestinians. Thom Yorke is the front man for Radiohead, and he finally came out with a statement. Let's read. Some guy shouting at me from the dark last year when I was picking up a guitar to sing the final song alone in front of 9,000 people in Melbourne didn't really seem like the best moment to discuss the unfolding humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Afterwards, I remained in shock that my supposed silence was somehow being taken as complicity, and I struggled to find an adequate way to respond to this and to carry on with the rest of the shows on the tour. That silence, my attempt to show respect for all those who are suffering and those who have died, and not to trivialize in a few words, has allowed other opportunistic groups to use intimidation and defamation to fill in the blanks, and I regret giving them this chance. This has taken a heavy toll on my mental health. You know who the real victim of Israel's genocide is? Thom Yorke of Radiohead. That's right. He's a creep. He's a weirdo. He's a Zionist. What the hell is he doing here? He does not belong here. The real toll here was Thom Yorke's mental health. Not the almost 20,000 children that Israel murdered in broad daylight in a live-streamed child holocaust, but actually Thom Yorke, Thomas Yorke of Radiohead. I would hope that for anyone who has ever listened to a note of my music, of my band, or any of the music I've created over the years, or looked at the artwork or read any of the lyrics, it would be self-evident that I could not possibly support any form of extremism or dehumanization of others. All I see in a lifetime's worth of work with my fellow musicians and artists is pushing against such things, trying to create. First of all, it's just a both sides argument, and the primary focus of this is still how much he was vilified in this process. So remember that. Not only is this an awful self-aggrandizing victimization narrative that he is hitting here, but it's also still both sidesing the matter. This, you will see a lot of these, okay? It's incredibly self-indulgent, yes. You will see a lot of this. You will see a lot of this in the upcoming weeks and months, where many artists who are unconditionally and firmly committed to Israel having to basically crawl through a mile of rusty nails to finally come out and be like, oh, God, I just don't want to do this, but also Israel, oh, come on, you've killed too many children. I actually posted in my Discord yesterday about this, ironically enough, before I even saw Thom Yorke's tweet or statement, where I said something along the lines of like, you will see a lot of like YouTubers who come out and make bold declarative statements about Israel being violent or whatever, now that they do not fear severe social and political and career repercussions for it. But in the process of other people coming out and saying like, yeah, I was always an anti-Zionist, or yeah, I always was saying fuck Israel, or just saying it quietly. In that process, if they turn around and offer any criticism whatsoever to all of the people who have been actively calling this out for 19 months, if they do that, I'm not letting them get away with that shit. I'm not Mr. Gatekeep the genocide that Israel is doing. I've said this already. Going forward, you will see a lot of people coming out and saying, I've always been against this, guys, please. But I don't mind it. I don't necessarily mind that people are coming out now that it's like safer. It's good. It means that more people are recognizing this. It means that there is no environment of censorship that can cause severe penalties to your future ambitions or whatever. That means that there is so broad momentum. You guys played a role in that. When you went out and you protested every week, you made it so that there was a permission structure. So now that it's happening, now that the tide is shifting, don't immediately push people away when they come to this conclusion. Don't immediately assume that they're being cynical, even though many of the people that are now coming out, only now coming out, are being cynical. They are cynically doing it. Make no mistake, you shouldn't immediately push these people away unless it's something like what Thom Yorke is saying, because he still is trying to both sides the situation. Bullshit. I'm still getting punished for speaking out as an American Jew in the entertainment industry. No, I know. There's still people who are in the crosshairs, myself included. People who have been doing this for quite a while that the Israeli government has actively put the beat on, actively put crosshairs on. It is what it is, okay? All I see in a lifetime worth of work with my fellow musicians and artists is pushing against such things, trying to create work that goes beyond what it means to be controlled, coerced, threatened, to suffer, to be intimidated, and instead to encourage critical thinking beyond borders, the commonality of love and experience, and free creative expression. Sounds naff, but true. For others, let me fill in the blanks now so we're nice and clear. I think Netanyahu and his crew of extremists are totally out of control and need to be stopped, and that the international community should put all the pressure it can on them to cease. Their excuse of self-defense has long since worn thin and has been replaced by a transparent desire to take control of Gaza and the West Bank permanently. This is an interesting thing to state right now after 19 months of, live stream child Holocaust, especially considering that a day after October 7, they said they were fighting human animals and that Israel had the right, nay, the responsibility to shut off food and water and electricity into the Gaza Strip to punish all of the entirety of the Palestinian population. They've never shied away from their exterminationist rhetoric. As a matter of fact, the only reason why people are now openly recognizing it is because it has become impossible to deny. I believe this ultra-nationalist administration has hidden itself behind a terrified and grieving people and used them to deflect any criticism, using that fear and grief to further their ultra-nationalist agenda with terrible consequences, as we see now the horrific blockade of aid to Gaza. While our lives tick along as normal, these endless thousands of innocent human souls are still being expelled from Earth for what? At the same time, the unquestioning free Palestine refrain that surrounds us does not answer the simple question of why the hostages have still not been returned. For what possible reason? I don't know, man. Maybe because they're f***ing genociding everyone in the Gaza Strip, which includes the f***ing Israeli hostages. Perhaps that's part of it, don't you think? This is what I mean. There is no quarters for this kind of f***ing bullshit, especially this far out. If you're going to come out and you're going to swing for the fences and try to basically reduce the impact of months and months of your silence and your refusal to recognize the humanity of Palestinians, you can't turn around and be like, why does Hamas still have the hostages? I don't know. Read a article, man. Read one singular article. You can read Haaretz if you want. They have basically laid it out for the past 19 months. Only a couple days after October 7, Hamas came out and literally told the Israeli negotiators that they would release all the hostages as long as Israel did not enter the Gaza Strip. Israel said, fuck off. Of course we're entering the Gaza Strip. 19 months of Israeli leadership saying over and over again, we don't give a fuck about the hostages. We don't care about the hostages. We don't want to do a ceasefire. We want to keep doing our exterminationist campaign. And you still have this insane statement 19 months in where you're supposed to be like, oh, you guys finally bullied me into saying something. Are you happy now? Only to turn around and be like, why does Hamas still have the hostages? I don't know. At this point, maybe you should investigate that yourself. Why did Hamas choose the truly horrific acts of October 7th? The answer seems obvious, and I believe Hamas chooses to hide behind the suffering of its people in an equally cynical fashion to their own purposes. Ridiculous. I also think there is further an extremely important point to make. If you ask this question, follow it up with a little bit of reading. Hamas does not exist if Israel's occupation doesn't exist. It's that simple. Palestinian emancipation has taken multiple forms throughout the 77-year occupation. Hamas is the last formation of it, and its militancy and its targets have changed even throughout the limited timeline that Hamas has even existed. At first, as a Muslim Brotherhood cutout Islamic charity organization, then an active party, and simultaneously a form of militancy that initially only targeted and struck non-civilian enemy combatants, that then also in the aftermath of the Cave of the Patriarchs massacre, turning around and actually targeting civilian targets as well. There is obviously no excuse for killing civilians, okay? But you have to recognize where this desperation comes from. If you act as though these groups just basically formed out of their hatred for Jews, especially when you're talking about the situation for Palestinians under the violent occupation of Israel for 77 years of ethnic cleansing, expulsions, death and destruction, humiliation, complete control over their lives, you are not actually covering the situation. You're not even remotely curious as to how this happened. Hamas kills its own people. They're opportunistic and siphon off the wealth from the locals. They should get removed. While isn't real, isn't good, they're just as bad. To say that Israel and Hamas are equally on equal footing is the most idiotic, childlike thing I've ever heard in my entire life, okay? I understand that your liberal brain wants to say, no, those guys are bad too, okay? They are not on the same planet. They are not on the same zip code. You are basically saying Jewish partisans that fought against the Nazi occupation in the lead up to the final solution, had bad ideas and engaged in acts of resistance against civilian populations as well, and therefore they're just as bad as the Nazi occupiers. That is an insane analogy to make, and the reason why you would never make that is because you have the capacity to recognize right from wrong when it comes to systematic violence and the resistance born out of that systematic violence when it's in the rear view mirror. Hindsight is 2020. Look in front of the events that are unfolding after 90 months, and maybe you can understand why the fuck they are not even on the same zip code on the same planet. It is crazy to literally be a latecomer to this and only now recognize that both are bad. They are born out of that situation, but they stamp down on their own people. Born out of what situation? Who caused the situation? Don't use vague generalities. Tell me, who caused the situation? Who caused the Nakba? What the hell? There is a reason why no one would say the Nat Turner Rebellion ultimately was incredibly violent, but it's nothing in comparison to 400 years of chattel slavery as a practice. Just like you can't say, well, the apartheid in South Africa was bad, but also a lot of the violent practices of the ANC and MK was really unconscionable. You can't say those things. The reason why you don't say those things is because you understand you have a much better way of analyzing things that took place, okay? No idea just looking at this from an average Joe position. Yeah, my job as a communicator, as a political commentator, is to explain to the average Joe that there is a severe asymmetry of power here. You don't have to be a perfect victim. Do you understand? That's ridiculous. And if you can comprehend that for any other time throughout history, even though there has been a liberal brain poisoning and a whitewashing of history. That's why people look to Nelson Mandela as a peaceful figure. They rewrite history in an effort for you to feel this exact way when you see regular emancipatory movements, non-state actors fighting justifiably against a state oppressor, a settler colonial enterprise designed around the notion of ethno-religious supremacy, an exterminationist principle. That's what Zionism is. It is a fascist ideology. It's a racist ideology. It is no different than Nazism. Even the average Joe podcasters are 5,000 times more informed than this chatter. It's embarrassing to be. Yeah, exactly. You got people like Theo Von at least going, dude, of course people are going to fight back. What are you supposed to do when met with the ultimate violence of Israel? Okay, when they recognize, they have the capacity to recognize right from wrong, but a lot of people still maintain this position where it's like, oh, average Joes don't really understand it. Libs think Jewish partisans were good just because they were Jewish and not because they were fighting fascists. The phrase never again was made by Kahan specifically as an expression of ethnic chauvinism. No, never again's application was not supposed to be Kahanist. And many people don't even think of it from that Kahanist framework until post-October 7, where so many... No, that chatter is not wrong. That chatter is not wrong. That chatter is not wrong. Most people do not hear never again and think, oh, this means never again just for Jews. That is the Kahanist interpretation of this statement. I wouldn't say Kahan made the phrase. I think he popularized it within a certain sect. But never again was not... was never seen as that Kahanist interpretation. Please don't say that. If you ask the average person what never again implies, no one would ever think of the Kahanist interpretation, never again just for Jews, because that is what it is. For those of you who don't know, Mayor Kahan is a ultra right-wing, super racist, basically the Grand Wizard of the KKK, but for Jews, okay? A Jewish supremacist, ultra right-wing terrorist. That's who Mayor Kahan is. And this is not an exaggeration. I mean, he was branded a f***ing terrorist by the Israeli government. His follower, Baruch Goldstein, famously went into the f***ing mosque in Jerusalem and shot and killed, did a heinous act of terror in occupied West Bank. He is a sociopath. He was a sociopath. Or not in Jerusalem, sorry, Hebron. I apologize. Mayor Kahan was such a f***ing terrorist that the terrorist state of Israel considered him to be a terrorist. A Brooklyn native, of course. Just like Baruch Goldstein was also one of our own. Yeah, 29 dead, 125 wounded, including children. A counter-protester I met had a long-live Baruch Goldstein poster. Yeah, it's freaks. A lot of people are able to basically mask their insanely extremist, insanely racist ideology, especially when it comes to Jewish supremacist thought, because most people don't know about these movements. Most people have not done any reading on even the history of Israel or the history of Palestine. And on top of that, most people only know about Judaism and Jews from the perspective of marginalization, post-Holocaust, and also how anti-Semitism manifests due to the way that they've learned about Jewish history. So for a lot of people, they get scared when someone even says like there is a Jewish supremacist slant, a Jewish fascist supremacist slant amongst some of these movements. And the irony, of course, is that the Jewish Power Party is now a viable party within the Israeli Knesset, within the Israeli parliament. Jews in Israel are not a marginalized population. Jews in Israel are the oppressor population. It's like saying fuck white people in America. This is something that a lot of people cannot comprehend. They don't understand it because their entire lives they've been taught like Jews have been pogromed, historically been undermined, historically been attacked, and that's precisely what's going on right now. Like that is the framework that they operate off of. Over there, that is not the case. And the greatest example I can always give you is this. In the Western world, where when someone spray paints the Star of David outside of a Jewish person's house, that means that person is probably going to get hate crimed. In Israel and in the West Bank, in occupied Palestinian territory, occupied illegally by the Israeli state, when they spray paint a Star of David outside of your house, that means Jewish settlers are going to come in and blow up your house. And this happens on a regular frequency, on a regular basis. Jewish settlers go to people's houses, blow them up, and get full protection from the Israeli occupying force in the process. If you try to even fight back, or if you're in the crosshairs, you get killed, either by the settlers themselves, who have been armed by the American state, okay, by way of Itamar Ben-Gvir from the Jewish Power Party, okay, which is literally the Klan. Like imagine the Klan, but instead of white supremacists, they are Jewish supremacists. They either get killed by those guys or they get killed by the Israeli occupying force. There's only so much back and forth we can have here where it's like a big part of the reason why you're confused is because of your lack of knowledge on this stuff, your lack of interest in finding out about the history of Israel. And I think a lot of people, instead of turning around, taking a deep breath and being like, let me listen to what this person is saying sincerely and try to understand this different perspective that I had never encountered, a perspective rooted within truth, by the way, historical truth, rather than the whitewashed, bastardized lies that you have learned. Instead of doing that 19 months into a genocide, you still go, I'm going to react with anger. I'm going to react with resentment because you're telling me something that does not correspond to my previous social conditioning. And it's very frustrating. It's your lack of knowledge in this process that's causing you to lash back out in this way. Having said that, and I, this is my criticism for Thom Yorke as well. When he says, why hasn't Hamas truly chose the truly attacks of October 7? The answer is Hamas chose the truly horrific attacks of October 7, the truly horrific act of October 7, as a direct consequence of, at that time, 75 years of Israeli occupation. And this isn't just my assessment of the situation. Even liberal Zionist publications like Haaretz had the exact same approach, had the exact same take, because that is the truth. You cannot keep killing people at a rapid clip and dominate every facet of their existence and expect and then show them that there is no negotiation, that negotiations in the so-called peace process have only led to more land grabs from the Israeli state in the West Bank, and then expect them not to do anything when you back them into a corner. Not agreeing with the tactics of Hamas or openly stating that there were atrocities that unfolded on October 7 does not change that dynamic, does not change the much larger atrocity of 75 years at that time of apartheid and military occupation and death and destruction. I also think there is further an extremely important point to make. Social media witch hunts, nothing new on either side, pressurizing artists and whoever they feel like that week to make statements, etc., do very little except heighten the tension. This fucking asshole, how old is Thom Yorke, dude? 56 years old, brother. 56 years old. You're a whole ass, almost 60-year-old adult. And you're over here talking about how the real problem here is social media. That is disgusting. I'm sorry that as a major artist who literally played in Israel, people were looking to you to say something. I don't care I listened to a lot of Radiohead when I was growing up. I don't personally give a shit whatever Thom Yorke says, okay? I don't care if Thom Yorke would come out and release a statement, but there are obviously plenty of people who look up to people like Thom Yorke. And in that moment, shouldn't your conscience guide you? Shouldn't you look at what is happening, what is taking place, the genocide that is unfolding, and say, my conscience is the reason why I'm making this statement, and not talk about social media pressure? You're fucking 60 years old. You're a multimillionaire. Jesus fucking Christ. Get over yourself. This kind of deliberate polarization does not serve our fellow humans and perpetuates a constant us and them mentality. It destroys hope and maintains a sense of isolation, the very things that extremists use to maintain their position. We facilitate their hiding in plain sight if we assume that the extremists and the people they claim to represent are one and the same, indivisible. If our world is ever able to move on from these dark times and find peace, it will only be when we rediscover what we share in common. And the extremists are sent back to sit in the dark. Oh my God, what a fence sitter. I sympathize completely with the desire to do something when we are witnessing such horrific suffering on our devices every day. It completely makes sense. But now I think it's a dangerous illusion to believe reposting or one or two line messages are meaningful, especially if it's to condemn your fellow human beings. They are unintended consequences. It is shouting from the darkness. It's not looking people in the eye when you speak. It's making dangerous assumptions. It's not a debate, and it is not critical thinking. Importantly, it is open to online manipulation of all kinds, both mechanistic and political. What is the alternative? I can't answer that easily. I do know in communities around the globe, this subject is now dangerously toxic and we are in uncharted waters. Dude, no one is holding your hand through this. Like, it's not that hard. The only reason why it would be hard to make a fucking statement like this is only because you love Israel. That's it. And you still can't let it go. And there are plenty of people who do have this framework, by the way. Plenty of fucking people who are stupid ass boomers who just cannot let this concept go, that Israel is still like a good country, a moral nation. There is a reason why when Radiohead played in Israel or when artists play in Israel, that is a controversial thing for many people way before October 7. Do you know why it is controversial? Because it's been an apartheid. It was an apartheid before October 7. October 7 happened because of the Israeli apartheid. That's it. There has never been a moment where Israel was a moral nation. I mean, there is no such thing as a moral nation anyway. Jesus Christ. I mean, states do an unimaginable amount of violence, but there are some kinds of violence, especially in the grand design post-World War II, where the type of repressive forces that come with the regular maintenance of an apartheid is seen a bridge too far by the average person. That's it. Israel being a settler colonial occupation that maintains the notion of Jewish supremacist thought and runs on an exterminationist policy of all of the indigenous population of the land, the Palestinians, the non-Jewish population of the land. This is a fascist ideology, and it is no different than apartheid South Africa. If it's worse, if not worse. I mean, it is worse. And it's not my assessment that is worse. It's Archbishop Desmond Tutu's assessment that Israel is a worse version of apartheid than even South Africa. It's over. It's done. The violence is still unfolding. The famine is still unfolding. But Israel's days, in terms of being like a normal country, is done. It's over. Israel will never be able to recover from the reputational damage that it brought about itself because of the arrogance that it displayed on the global stage as it engaged in its ethnic cleansing campaign of Palestinians, an arrogance that was born not simply out of Jewish supremacist thought or whatever, even though that plays a role on it, okay? But an arrogance that was born out of having 75 years of unlimited propaganda coming from the West. That is the reason why many people ask, myself included, how the fuck are they lying in the worst ways possible? Like, they're not even trying to massage the narrative at all. The reason why they don't even have to massage the narrative at all, or think that they don't have to massage the narrative at all, is because they've never done that. They've never done this in the past. They've never had to. They could just say whatever they wanted to, and whatever they said went. What is the alternative? I can't answer that easily. I'm sure that at this point, what I've written here will in no way satisfy those who chose to target myself or those I work with. They will spend time picking holes and looking for reasons to continue. Yeah, you did a horrible job writing this. I have written this in the simple hope that I can join with the many millions of others praying for the suffering, isolation, and death to stop, praying that we can collectively regain our humanity, dignity, and our ability to reach understanding that one day soon this darkness will have passed. Once this chapter of ethnic cleansing is closed, Israel will actively move in the direction of whitewashing and trying to launder its reputation. It is up to all of us to make sure that we do the right thing and don't forget the hundreds of thousands of Palestinian victims in the process. Israel will inevitably hit the liberal Zionist slant to say, this is entirely in the hands of Benjamin Netanyahu. I can't believe he did this. Oh my God, it's a couple right-wing ultra-nationalists that really changed the dynamic of this country. I mean, this is not who we are. This is not what we represent. It is what Israel represents.